Hey folks, welcome to our victory celebration town hall for stopping Bill 64. Just want to review a few housekeeping rules for the Zoom town hall. Also, it's going to be appearing on Facebook. If you could turn your cameras and your mics off as you join the Zoom call, that would be really helpful for us. It's just there's a lot of people joining and we're trying to preserve the bandwidth for the speakers and the guests that we have tonight. So yeah, if you could kindly turn your camera off and then turn your mic off for obvious reasons. At the same time, we do want this to be very interactive. So if you want to jump into the comments section, just by opening up the chat screen at the bottom of your Zoom window. And then if you want to pose questions, make comments, raise points, maybe add a bit to some of the commentary that you're hearing from our speakers tonight, that would be really awesome. So again, if you have a question or a comment, please pose it using the chat function. Until then, though, we kindly ask that you turn off your cameras and mute your microphones just to facilitate the overall discussion. So obviously, we're gathered here tonight for a very momentous and kind of unique occasion, which is to celebrate the government confirming today, in fact, that they are going to withdraw Bill 64. And you can see on screen next to me is Nahanni Fontaine, our colleague, our House leader for the Manitoba NDP caucus, and also the MLA for St. John's, who has been very vocal and very active in fighting Bill 64. She's going to, I guess, walk us through what happened, what the news is, and a little bit about what's coming next. But first, we did just want to begin with a little bit of a land acknowledgement. So I just wanted to open by saying that we are gathering on this call from all across the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe, the Inuit, the Dene, the Dakota, the Cree, and of course, the Métis homelands. And I myself am coming from Treaty 1, from the Métis homelands, and also from the Dakota territories. And the land acknowledgement that we've been starting with, Nahanni, it was kind of in the news today. I don't know if you want to jump in and just spell that out a little bit, because it does kind of relate to the overall conversation tonight.
Yeah, so this morning, the Premier, Calvin Gertson, announced in a press conference that they would be looking to do consultation in respect of establishing a land acknowledgement in the Manitoba Legislative Assembly. And I'll just preface that by saying that actually since 2017, 2018, Wob and I have been trying to get a land acknowledgement established. We've sent letters and emails back and forth. We provided the wording, the language for the land acknowledgement, which is a pretty standard land acknowledgement for Treaty 1 territory here. They didn't like that, so they thought maybe it was too long. And so we kind of tried to tighten it up, and they didn't like that language. So, you can see that we've been having these discussions since 2017, 2018. And today it was announced that they were going to do like consultations with Indigenous people, even though we're Indigenous and we've been doing this work for a long, long time. And it's going to be headed by 3 non-Indigenous MLAs. So that was in the news today. We're still going to try to fight to ensure that there's a land acknowledgement. Hopefully when we come back, that would be nice. We come back October 6th. So we'll see what happens. Stay tuned on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it is because of the advocacy of yourself and others that it's finally come about. And, the PCs are sort of desperately scrambling to try and make themselves look like they are where the rest of Manitoba is. Though whether it's on the land acknowledgement or whether it's on Bill 64, they've clearly been way, way behind where the rest of the province is. So you've heard from Nahanni right there. We're also joined by Nello Altamar, who is our education critic, and Amanda Laughlin, who is the MLA for the Pawcamisac. And we also have a guest who is a parent and teacher in Westman, Marley. So they'll be joining us in just a little while. But first off, again, why are we here today? We're here because the people of Manitoba spoke up and stopped Bill 64. So I don't know if you want to do the finger snaps or if you want to do the applause or if you want to put up an emoji in the corner of your screen. but it's pretty rare that a majority government backs off their legislative agenda. And the reason why it happened this time is because there was more than 500 presenters, tens of thousands of lawn signs, people just opposed to this thing like never before. And I do want to shout out our team. None of that happens unless our team delays this bill this spring, right? If we hadn't delayed the bill, it would have passed second reading back in March. And if you remember back in March, nobody had even heard of Bill 64 yet. So we did play an important role. And now we kind of see that come to fruition, where the government, the premier, I'm still getting used to saying Premier Kelvin Goertzen for the record, but the premier announces today that they're going to back off that bill. So maybe, Nahani, we can just start there in terms of the Bill 64 discussion. Unprecedented, is that the right way to think about this in terms of what's happened here?
Yes, it certainly is. And I guess I can, talk from the perspective of both yourself and myself. We both got elected in 2016. Obviously, there was a huge majority for the PCs. And since 2016, I don't remember an opportunity where we were able to kill a bill, and certainly not an opportunity to kill 5 bills as we did. And, that is a direct result. That work is from the mobilization of Manitobans across the province and across different sectors, who mobilize with signs and emails and tweets and, making sure that they registered for the standing committee. I mean, as long as I've been elected, there's never been that many people that have been registered to a standing committee, over 500 people. And from what I understand, I've asked the clerks, it's actually one of the highest in the history of Manitoba. So, that's a real testament to how engaged Manitobans are in the political process, and how when we have Manitobans engaged and they mobilize themselves, we actually can make change. We can accomplish the things that we want to accomplish, even in the midst of a majority government, even in the midst of a premier and a caucus that were so determined to have Bill 64 passed, and yet we all did it. And so really, that's a congratulations to all Manitobans, a congratulations to our caucus. But it really does, like I said, it really illustrates that, when we work together, when we mobilize, we can actually accomplish things. I just want to quickly say that, what happens in the House, for the vast majority of people, people don't really necessarily know what goes on in the House or pay attention to what goes on in the House. That's okay. But it actually does matter what we do in the House. And, one of the tools that we have within our toolbox as the official opposition is to be able to delay 5 bills from the total sweep of bills that any government would bring forward, that the PCs would bring forward. This last sitting, the PC caucus brought forward 73 bills. And so you can imagine the discussions we had in caucus when we had to look at all of these bills and only choose 5. But we knew from the very beginning that Bill 64 was hands down going to be one of the bills that we delayed. And, we delayed other bills, Bill 16, which would have made it harder for workers to join a union or assert their rights. Bill 35, which would have increased Manitoba hydro rates. I'm sure some folks heard about that today. Bill 40, which would make it harder for us to deal with the addictions crisis. And then Bill 57, which coupled with other bills, was really oppressive in Manitoba and making it more difficult to protest, to peacefully protest. And so really, congratulations to Manitobans. I've never seen it. WAV has never seen it. We were kind of in shock. We were so happy and just so proud to be a part of this moment.
It was pretty amazing, all the different groups and organizations that were getting involved. Manitoba Teachers Society, we've all seen the slam the door on 64 ads. You had the school boards, you had a brass band formed in the Wolseley area just to make songs against Bill 64. You had tons of people taking signs. like pretty much even any highway you would drive on in Manitoba would have signs on it, not just residential streets, but like highways in rural Manitoba, northern Manitoba. So it really does show what people can do when they work together. And yeah, it just shows the importance, like you said. You know, we delay a bill, which sometimes seems like it's like inside the legislative bubble, but then it opens up a doorway for Manitobans to really express themselves politically. So it was pretty awesome to see that all unfold after the bill delay this year. I guess the flip side of that is people were gearing up for this big fight this fall, committee presentations, signs out there, you know, probably even rallies and protests would have taken place over these next few weeks. And now with the government backing down, the government running away, the government in a race to kind of like each of them say like, no, I was against Bill 64 first. No, it was me. I was actually the one who blew the whistle on Bill 64. Anyways, we'll leave that to them. But I'm wondering, what can people do? You know, you got a lawn sign. I know you got a pretty good creative suggestion for what you can do with a lawn sign. Or maybe you actually wrote up a committee presentation. What can you do with those things?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that, you know, again, so many people were mobilized and really put energy and work into fighting Bill 64. And like I said, you know, one of the things that people did was they registered for the standing committee. And as folks know, one of the things that you do at standing committee is you have 10 minutes to present to all the MLAs about why you're opposed to the bill or why you agree with the bill, but also an opportunity to provide a different vision, a different expression of lived experience, different knowledge. And so what we're hoping, we have our website, you know, Fight Bill 64. What I know all of us in caucus would love to see is actually those presentations. And so we've created an opportunity for folks to, if you want to upload your presentations and provide that feedback, provide that expertise that you have, either as an educator or a parent or a student, upload that to the website and we will read them. It will inform the way that we move forward. And certainly it will inform us as an NDP caucus, as a party, you know, when we form government. You know, hopefully that's sooner than later. We're working hard to make sure that that happens. But we want to hear from Manitobans so that can inform the work that we do now and well into the future. And then for the signs, if folks are wanting to get rid of their signs or keep their signs, you never know. I always say that these signs are kind of like historical moments, so keep them, put them up in your garage if you want. But if you don't want them and you want to get rid of them, you know, I know that schools are taking signs because they use them for art projects. So if you've got kids, maybe ask your teachers, maybe they'll take those signs. If not, Arts Junction will gladly take people's signs. All you have to do is call them in advance and just let them know that you've got a sign or a couple of signs that you'd like to drop off. And then they give those signs out to the community. So it's a really good way to reuse that so that we're not putting them in the garbage. I've asked our staff to put Arts Junction's information into the comments. And I think, like I said, you know, we want to hear from people. We want that engagement. And again, we really, really do appreciate and honor all of the time and effort that people took to participate in this process.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I like that. Putting the signs back into use as part of arts class and arts programs like Arts Junction. So really encourage people to do that. I'll throw you a bit of a curveball here, Nahanni, but I think you're going to be okay with it because it's something that you're passionate about. I'm just wondering, with Orange Shirt Day coming up, September 30th, and then, of course, on October 4th, you have the day to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. I know there's a lot of educators on the call, and educators are very good at talking about some of the importance of these days. I'm just wondering if maybe you want to share some of your perspectives, especially after all the disclosures that we had this summer about how would you encourage educators, teachers, school staff to talk about Orange Shirt Day, to talk about October 4th this year, and even in light of some of the work that they did around Bill 64?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. You know, anybody that knows me knows that I'm pretty blunt about things, and I'm pretty open, and in some cases really brutally honest about things. And you know, I've lived that way for a long time because I want us as a community, as a people, as a province, as a country, to really reflect on our history, either our personal histories, our collective histories, but certainly the colonial history of this country. And so I know that, you know, it can be difficult to talk about these issues, but not more difficult than actually living through these issues. And so I really do encourage educators and folks to be honest about the history of residential schools, and certainly the last, you know, 4 or 5 months, you know, Canada's reckoning and what we found out, to be honest and about MMIWG2S and the epidemic levels of violence against Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirited. I've raised my boys, they're used to it. They're used to me from very young, being very open and very honest about, you know, the things that go on in our world. And I'm proud of the men that they've grown up into, because they know that history, they know those realities, and they can stand up against that, and they can fight for equality. And I believe that students, children need that, but that also they want that truth. We all want that truth, and we need that truth. So I just encourage people to be courageous and to be honest.
No, I think that's really good advice. And I really am optimistic thinking about this generation that's going through school now, learning about these things and what they're going to be able to do when they're adults and they're running the province and the country. It's really amazing. So we got a bunch of positive commentary while you're speaking, Nahanni. Basically, a lot of people saying, thank you for delaying the bill, helping to build the momentum for Slam the Door, and thanks for stopping these adjective bills. I won't say the exact adjective that was used in the comment. It's not that it's not safe for work, but maybe it wouldn't be safe for school. I wouldn't say it in a K-12 classroom, so that's why I won't repeat it here. But yeah, really appreciate your leadership on the legislative side of this, Nahanni, as well as communicating this. And for people wondering, there are events on Orange Shirt Day. One is in your constituency, I believe. There's a march from the Human Rights Museum to St. John's Park, where there will be a powwow. And then are there events coming up on October 4th, or are things going to be virtual this year? How's that looking?
Yeah, we're just working on that right now. We're hoping to have some information out hopefully next week, but I think that it's going to be, again, you know, a little bit more informal and a little bit more casual, just because of COVID, more than what we've done in the past. But there'll be something at the monument at the Forks.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Nahanni. Really appreciate that. Well, now we are going to move to a different perspective. This one is coming to us from one of our guests, Marley, who we are welcoming on right now. And Marley's pronouns are they and them. So if you want to address them in the or refer to them in the chat, please use their pronouns. Marley is a parent and a teacher at a school in the Westman. It's a rural school. And certainly, I think they've been looking at the issues related to Bill 64 very closely from both perspectives, from the perspective of a parent and the perspective of a teacher. So there we go. Now we got Marley spotlighted. First off, how are you doing this evening?
Good. You know, it's September, so a little tired, but I'm doing really well. It's been nice to be back in the classroom, and I've been really enjoying the last, week, especially today after the announcement. It's officially been scrapped, Bill 64. So
yeah, obviously we don't want to count our chickens before they hatch and until they actually withdraw the bill in the legislature, but it does seem like a lot of people are doing a happy dance today. But what does that mean to you? Like, how are you feeling about the bill being dead and putting both your hats as teacher and parent on?
There's just a lot to unpack there. I'm relieved. I was really worried. just coming from the perspective of a teacher working in a small rural school, taking off the moratorium on closing schools was quite scary, because we all know that if you do close schools in small communities, families don't have a chance to grow, and therefore the population starts to slow down and eventually move away to places where you can raise your kids and go to school. So that was quite worrisome for me. Obviously, the cuts that were coming into education as well. As a parent, having a 2-year-old who's not in the system yet, but our family would have been considered a sensitive topic, and I was really, really worried where he was going to go through a school not seeing himself represented, not in books, not in conversation, and really kind of a taboo subject. And so that was
spell that out. Like some of us are familiar with the whole sensitive topic comment that Minister Cullen made, but can you just talk about that a bit and like how you took his comments and what they were trying to do there?
Yeah, in education, there have been topics in different divisions that are not necessarily openly talked about. Being part of the 2S LGBTQ community, that is not always allowed to be talked about. The different, as you're talking about residential schools in Orange Shirt Day, talking about the true history of our colonial history, bringing in issues about government. I remember when Minister Collins said that maybe we shouldn't be talking about this in the classroom, but it was my students who were bringing it up to me, wondering what was going on. A lot of them, actually a good majority of my students ride the bus, and the idea of them having to be on a bus for more than an hour was quite stressful. Some of them are already on the bus for about 45 minutes just one way. So that's an hour and a half. And so it's, it's when you get into, topics about sex education, a lot of that becomes a sensitive topic. And so it would then be dependent on the community to decide what will and will not be acceptable within the classroom. And unfortunately, the 2S LGBTQ community has been one that's been targeted time and time again with sensitive topics.
Yeah. And I guess on a personal level, you're reflecting on that. You're reflecting on it on a professional level. Maybe that brings us to the conversation about looking ahead. Bill 64 has been defeated, but I don't think anyone expects that everything's all good with the PC government and the school system now. What sort of concerns do you have about this government and the K-12 system going forward? And maybe if you want to start with the sensitive content stuff, but then maybe broaden out to other areas too, in terms of your concerns with what's next or what could still come.
Well, we know Bill 64 is just one avenue that this government has taken. They've been here for about 6 years now, and it's been 6 years of cuts. It's been underfunding. They keep saying that this is the most, but that's actually untrue because they haven't been matching inflation. So as you add that up every year, the sensitive topics, I mean, the big thing is we need a comprehensive sex education within our school system. There has been a lot of advocacy, like a lot of advocates for that, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, which can be quite detrimental to our young people if they're not getting the information that they need. And just like it didn't start with the fight of 64 and it's not going to end here. And I think that's really important as well. Like, I'm doing my victory lap a little bit while I can, because it's nice to have a win. It's been a while, but we have to start thinking about the future, right? What do we need? What do our kids need? Well, we need mental health resources within our schools. We have kids who have been dealing with a pandemic for 18 months. We have kids who weren't able to go out and play sports and be part of their communities. And reach out and be with each other at a time where being social is intrinsic part of who they are and really important to their development. And so mental health shouldn't be predicated on the amount of students you have in your school, but based on the fact there should be somebody available at every single school all the time. And with the current funding, this government, they keep talking about it, but we're not seeing it, right? They keep talking about putting money into education. We're not seeing it in the classroom. We're seeing the opposite. We have less resources. We have less support staff. We have even, we don't have budgets to buy sometimes the textbooks that we need. We go out there, former Premier Pallister thought it was fine that I would go out and spend my money on school supplies. And to be quite honest, I have already spent because I want to make sure that the money that I do have for my students doesn't get used up right in September. And it's something that we're quite facing. And after 6 years of the cuts, it's going to be really hard to catch up. And it's, I'm fearful of the future, but I'm hopeful because right here, we have a lot of people who've been fighting against Bill 64. We have a victory, but I think we just really need to continue. I might advocate donating to the NDP. We need a progressive government in power. And and even just memberships, just small little things, reaching out, getting together, talking about these issues with your friends and family and kind of pushing on it and really changing the conversation to understanding that education is not somewhere where you save money, it's where you invest, because you're investing in your future, you're investing in your young people, and you're going to see the return on your investment. Just like when you take money out, you're going to see the effects of that, as we have seen young people leaving the province at the highest rate since before the NDP. So I think that's one of the biggest things, and just kind of, we need to continue to fight, celebrate, but knowing that we still have a fight ahead of us. So,
well, there's a lot of really good points there. And, I think it's a good setup for our next speaker, Nello, but, you're right to call out the rhetoric that the government uses. The reality is that this year alone, they cut $5 million in provincial funding for the K-12 system. So it's not even a point where they're failing to match inflation anymore. It's now they're actually reducing the amount of money for the K-12 system. And so Bill 64, maybe that thing is being taken out of the window, but their agenda to reduce the amount of support for the school system, the K-12 school system, that continues straight away. So thanks so much for all that you do in the classroom, Marley. And thanks so much for sharing your perspective tonight. And hey, yeah, listen to Marley, take out a membership. Why not? Donate a couple bucks, help out the NDP. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Right on. So again, that was Marley, and we thank them very much for their participation tonight, bringing that perspective of a parent, bringing that perspective of a teacher. I wanted to invite our colleague Nello here. Nello, you were listening in as with everyone else. It just seems to naturally set up the question to you, what next? What else are the PCs doing when it comes to education? And maybe I can just preface that a little bit. Like, we know this whole PC leadership is going on, so they're all trying to position themselves as this kinder, gentler PC government. Meanwhile, it's the exact same people who are there cheerleading Pallister and Bill 64 and everything like that. But even if Bill 64 gets withdrawn on October 6th, as we now expect, talk to us about some of the things that, you expect to see next, and what are some of the concerns you're hearing right now from teachers and school staff and others in the education system?
Well, thanks for that, Bob. I'll just say how really inspired I am by Marley and what they're doing in their classroom. It's just so amazing, because that's what it's all about. It's what we do in our classrooms. And teachers are just so happy to be back, that they're doing everything that they can. And we heard that with Marley and what they're doing specifically. But they don't have a real partner in this government, Wob. A real partner would have made investments in HVAC, would have ensured that air quality was looked after in the months that they had to prepare. They would have had a plan for testing staff. All the rapid tests that we have in Manitoba, where are they being used? Where are they being deployed? Schools would have been a perfect place for that, especially now, because we have until October 31st to ensure that everyone is fully vaccinated in schools. And this is, using a rapid test would have made it real safe environment. And there isn't really even a plan to do out there when it comes to outbreaks. What are we going to do when that happens? So there's lots of questions there. Even with extracurricular and sporting activities, how are those things going to be handled? And of course, paid sick leave for parents that don't have that at work. When a child is sick or someone in the family is sick, we need to ensure that they're able to look after themselves so that they're not adding to community spread. And then finally, one of the biggest things that we've always talked about is we know enough, we haven't been in a regular school environment these past 18 months. We needed to invest in clinical staff and mental health supports. I will tell you the crush of demand on clinical supports right now must just be overwhelming. And there was absolutely no plan in place for that. And these are real concerns. Instead of spending time on Bill 64, they needed to make sure that schools were properly funded and properly supported during this pandemic.
A lot of good points there, and I'm just checking down through the list of what you spoke about. You pretty much laid out a pretty good back to school plan there, Nello, that we
And
have
we've
been
been talking about
suggesting.
that for months.
And the government's still not doing some of the basics like HVAC ventilation. In the meantime, instead of laying out a cogent, cohesive plan like you just did, we had a minister who's putting on his tinfoil hat and saying there's a grand conspiracy out against him, and also kind of like turning with whatever way the wind blows. But maybe we could just talk about the education minister. What have we learned from Cliff lately? What have we seen from Minister Cullen?
Well, unfortunately, we don't see anybody that's really learned their lesson or is being contrite. Hasn't apologized for accusing teachers and parents for spreading misinformation. You know, I think in the end, when a kid, just like Marley outlined, when a kid sees a sign out there protesting a government bill, they want to learn about it in school. So instead of a minister supporting that type of teaching and learning, we have a minister that wanted to stifle that. The absolute antithesis of what needs to be happening in school. And that's coming from the education minister. And you know, these are the pieces that really frustrate people, because education is seen as a public trust, something that we hand governments, a trusting piece that we need to ensure is handled differently. It's handled with care, because this is about kids. And Marley said it too, when they said that education is an investment, not a line item cost. And this is what we see with this government. And believe me, they're not stopping their plans to continue cuts to classrooms. I will say that from 2016 right up until now, there are cuts that are outlined in that frame document that I know everybody knows about, that you could see the provincial share of cost of education has gone down. And the share that school boards have to pick up has gone up, and they can only do that through property tax. And of course, you know, they said that they're, you know, going to come up with more when it comes for education. So even though Bill 64 is done, this team is still there. This team doesn't have a lot of creativity on their side, and they're going to go back and they're going to use a lot of the same pieces that were in Bill 64. So let's be clear. They wanted power and control. That's what Bill 64 was about. And I believe they're going to continue to try to do that, but in different ways. That's why we have to remain vigilant, because as I said earlier, public schools are public trust and something that needs to be invested in and not cut.
Absolutely. And quite a few people in the chat agree with you. We got Chad saying basically what you're saying, the PCs are still going to find ways to cut education, even though we won, the fight is still not over. And then we have Marjorie asking a question. Do you think they'll bring back any of Bill 64 under something else? Have you heard anything privately if they are? After listening to the news, I think we need to keep an eye on them. I still don't trust them. That makes two of us, at least, Marjorie, maybe more Nello when we get to you. And then there's some comments too about Bill 71
Absolutely.
and Bill 45. But why don't we pick up with Bill 71, Nello? Because this does talk about the point you were making there, reducing the amount of funding for the education system. And Bill 71 passed this year. We were unable to delay that one. So what impact does that have on funding for schools and investments in education?
Well, it takes the eye off of what we really need to do with public schools. What they've done is they've said that with property tax rebates, we're going to be able to send out $248 million this year.
$250 million.
$250 million. And next year, another $250 million in a system that is a $2.1 billion system per year. It tells you where their priorities are. They'd rather mail you a check than invest in schools. And that to me sends very clear messages. And
yeah, we should point out that that whole scheme they came up with after their public support started cratering, right? So it really does seem more about trying to buy public opinion than about what's good for education or what's good for the economy or what's good for the province.
Exactly. It's the old distract and deflect strategy. Don't pay attention here to what we're doing in education, but we'll mail you a check. Right? I mean, the very, and this is something that people are really turned off by, because again, the public, Manitobans expect their government to look after public schools, to ensure that they're properly funded so that our kids are prepared for the future. Many of us on this call benefited from public schools, and we need to ensure that that continues.
And so if we're looking ahead, the PC leadership gets settled. Do you expect any change? Is there going to be all of a sudden dramatic new investments in K-12, or are we going to see more of the same as we head into 2022?
This is the same crew that would have voted for Bill 64. I'll tell you that. Had we not have delayed it, that thing would be happening right now. And we'd be in the midst of a full-blown transformation of the public education system. So I'll ask everybody on this call, what do you think would happen? And so that is why we have to be extra vigilant and ready for anything, because they are still in government. But I will tell you that Manitoba NDP will be putting up a fierce opposition to whatever they come with to the table, because I simply don't believe it'll be anything that will benefit public education and kids, families, or communities.
No, I think that's right. Like the one thing that we've seen that's consistent with this government, no matter which department it is, started with healthcare, but we've seen it in every department since then, is they just want to reduce the amount of people working in the public sector, and they want to reduce the amount of money that's invested in public services. So it's reduce the number of people and reduce the amount of investment. And so Mr. Pallister left office. They're all running as fast as they can away from his legacy, even though they're all the people who empowered him, emboldened him, and cheerleaded for him, applauded for him in the legislature. But, you know, they're going to try and rebrand themselves. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the same people behind the scenes pulling the strings. It's going to be the same mentality around the cabinet table. The caucus is going to be the same. And so I do think that that idea of reducing the number of people who work in education and reducing the amount invested is still going to prevail.
Exactly. I mean, we see it in the Department of Education. The Department of Education in these past 5 years has been completely hollowed out. It's hardly, they're not replacing people as they retire. And that's a huge issue right now, especially when
Hollowed out, but then we also hear, sorry, but I was just going to make the point now that we also hear that there's not that many people with actual education experience.
Well, I mean, I can certainly say, that at the ADM and deputy minister level, not one educator.
Yeah.
And that is very concerning.
You know, that is one thing I've noticed about the PC approach too, is that, you know, all the ministers who made the cuts, whether it's Fielding or Gertson or whatever, they all went to school and studied liberal arts. And then they want to go and cut post-secondary funding. And then, you know, others come in and, you know, now they want to cut the school funding. It really does seem that over and above just wanting to make cuts, one of the hallmarks of the PC administration is that they want to close the door behind them. It's good for them when they can benefit from these public programs and these, you know, educational opportunities, but they don't see fit to ensure that the next generation can also benefit.
Exactly. It's that whole public trust piece. And they don't seem to understand that. They're stewards, not cutters.
Should be stewards anyways.
Should be stewards, exactly.
Okay, we got a couple comments I'll read you to here, or I'll read to you here. Penny says, we have seen what the PC stand for. It's about cost. They severely impaired our healthcare system by the cuts that they implemented from 2017 to 2019. They intend to cut education funding one way or another. Their actions right now are because they can see how unpopular 64 was, and they will change the name, but not the proposed outcome cut.
Exactly.
And then we had Murray. Maybe we can end here because I think this is a nice transition to our next speaker. Murray saying, on behalf of the Northern School Boards, want to thank the 4 Northern MLAs and Nello for their support in fighting Bill 64. So there you go, Nello. Much like with Nahanni, a lot of people giving you kudos for the good, strong work that you've done all year. All right, that's Nello Altamar. He is the MLA for Transcona. He is our education critic, and he is a lifelong educator. And you see this when you go to Transcona. You go to Transcona, you go to somewhere down Regent. Nello can stop and talk to anyone, and he either taught them, he taught their partner, he taught their kids, you know, he taught somebody in their extended clan. And so once again, we really, look, you see right there in the chat, even it pops up right away. Nello's my former principal, Nello's my teacher. And so Nello, you've had a huge influence on the young minds of our province, and you continue to have that influence with the great work you're doing now. So thank you so much. So again, we're talking about Northern education there, right towards the end. And we figured it would be good to have one of our Northern MLAs join us. So we have Amanda Laughlin here. And Amanda is the MLA for the Pas-Kamisak, and also has been, I guess, advocating not only as MLA, but also as a parent, you know, having some the school age kids these days. So why don't we start a bit with just what's going on at the grassroots level in Northern Manitoba when it comes to Bill 64, when it comes to education?
Well, I'm just extremely proud of the grassroots movement that got rid of this very bad bill. And I think it would have been more detrimental here in Northern Manitoba. Imagine combining 4 school divisions. One voice, one representative. It just didn't make sense to us at all. And I just want to say that there's this young lady named Marcia. She's the principal for Mary Duncan School. Mary Duncan School is a special place for me. It's basically where our kids go, where other schools have given up on them, and they sign up at Mary Duncan School, and they're more sensitive to their needs because we're dealing with children who have been or in the CFS system, poverty, mental health. And I just couldn't imagine this precious school that's so badly needed in our region. If Bill 64 would have been passed, the school would have been just swallowed up. And the needs, our unique needs in Northern Manitoba, would have been completely ignored. And I was very impressed by Marcia, by her approaching me and asking me, what can we do to fight this bill? How can we get involved? How can we send the message out? And she was my focal point in listening to our leadership, such as you, Wob, and how we can get that message out and with our provincial NDP representatives. And I just wanted to say that in my 6 years as being an MLA, this is the largest grassroots movement that I have ever seen to fight a bill. And in fact, I was told that there was over 500 people that were signed up to speak against this bill in committee. And that's a record-breaking number. So I'm really impressed as to how many people came forward and participated, got involved in this legislative process. And this is how it's done, folks. That is how change is made. And without your help behind our voices, our words debating against this horrible bill within the chamber, it wouldn't have went anywhere without the grassroots movement. And I'm very impressed. And I'm so honored to have been part of that and witness that and tell my children and grandchildren that change can be made as such. And I just wanted to let you know too that even though Bill 64 was scrapped, this fight is still not over. I want to talk about NDP membership. As many of you know, that my late father was Oscar Laughlin, and he sold me my first membership when I was a young teenager.
Nice.
So I used to tease him and say, oh, I'm part of your cult gatherings now, his NDP conventions. And guess who's there now? Me. And now my daughter as well. So 3 generations of New Democrats in my family. So I get teased often by my friends that I wore orange diapers when I was a little girl, and that I grew up around what we think, what are important values and principles. And those values that I share and hold, which is to raise people up, is what being a New Democrat is all about to me. I've met so many wonderful people at NDP conventions, premier dinners, nonprofit organizations, people who just have the same values and principles as us, as what we believe. Like, we took an oath as a New Democrat, and basically the oath is to raise people up. But we need to build in numbers. We are much stronger in numbers, and that's why I'm reaching out to our folks to buy an NDP membership. It is only $10, and we are looking for donations as well. And we need that movement, because I know we will form the next government. And I'm just excited to say and share with everyone that I know that Wab Kinew will be our premier of Manitoba. So with that, please stress it out. Join our movement. We are stronger in numbers when an NDP membership is purchased. So with that, Kinanas Kumitan, everybody, for your fight. Ego, sir.
Kinanas Kumitan, Amanda and Oscar Laughlin, we remember you, former MLA and minister and party stalwart of the NDP. So I know that school you're talking about, Mary Duncan, that's one of the first places you took me to in the PA on one of my early visits as a politician. So I know that everything's coming straight from the heart when you're speaking there. So thanks so much for all that outreach you do. Thanks for being a good advocate for your community and for your region. And thanks for, trying to broaden out this movement that we have by sharing a bit of your experience. So thank you so much, Amanda. I want to thank everyone else for joining the call here tonight. We were joined, of course, by our colleagues, Amanda Laughlin, the MLA for the Pawcamisac, whom you just heard, Nello Altamar, who is the MLA for Transcona, and of course, Nehani Fontaine, who is our leadoff speaker, who is the MLA for St. John's. And we also heard from parent and teacher Marley, who brought us that perspective from Westman. So once again, I know that the people on the call tonight, the people following along on Facebook, have done an instrumental, tremendous, humongous thing in stopping this PC government in its tracks, forcing them to back off Bill 64. But hopefully we've managed to shed a bit of light on why we can't stop now. We can't just celebrate Bill 64 and get on with our lives, because our lives are not going to remain unaffected by this PC government. They're still going to cut funding for the schools that our kids go to, or that we work in, or that are part of our communities. We know that they're still going to try and bring in changes to governance, changes to the structure of the education. They're going to try and limit debate and rule certain content off limits. And because the movement that we're a part of and this grassroots surge of Manitobans, I know, believes in having a free and open society with strong public services and strong public institutions. That's why we have to keep pushing forward. And so we've achieved something very remarkable so far in working together. And I just hope that we can continue pushing hard until we get that education system and we get that provincial government and we get that Manitoba that we all believe in. So once again, I know this is time taken out of your personal lives that I very much appreciate. And I want to thank everyone for participating. Merci beaucoup d'avoir nous joindre, and thank you very much.